Hey everyone, today we will be drawing this portrait in real time from start to finish. I will be drawing on my EtcherLab sketchbook and I'm using my Blackwing matte pencil. This is a photo of Sunhwa Min and I will have her Instagram linked in the description. I will also have my Pinterest board for all of my reference photos in there, so if you guys want to check it out. When I'm starting off my sketches like this one, when I'm using a very soft pencil, I usually like to hold it on its side so it's not too dark initially. You really want to keep these first few layers of your sketch not that dark. So we're drawing this circle and it's really two-dimensional. It's a sphere and this is the round part of the skull. So once you have that, I'm doing another circle beside it to represent the flat sides of the skull. And then really quickly, we're just dividing that into 4 sections, mostly to remind us that this is a flat surface. Now that we have that, we're just extending that over to the rest of the circle, and that will be our eye line. And you see right here that it divides the sphere in half, and the chin depends on each person, but I think it's a good idea to make the length about the same distance as those 2 sections. So later on we're going to be extending the chin to about that the same distance. And now this is really important, is the line that goes through the middle of the face, so we can then know where in the middle the lines for the chin will meet. And then I'm just really roughly placing the neck. What I'm using as a basis for where to place it is the distance from the chin to where the neck is. So then we are just placing the ear, and it's really convenient that we are starting it from the middle of that cross on the side of her head. So the top part of it is in the middle and it ends right where the cross ends too. And then we're just looking at the reference photo again to see where her hairline ends. And then after that, we are just using where the ear ends as a basis for where the nose will also end. So we're just going to be extending that line over to her face too. And then I'm just really quickly trying to soften up the skin under her chin more. But after that, we are just going to divide the distance from the bottom of her nose to where her chin ends. Then that's where we're going to be putting the mouth line. Now we're going to start slowly placing her nose. I really just want to do it like a triangle, and because we have all of those lines in place, it's easy for me to see where to place it. And then I'm starting with the eyebrows, and they just sit where we had those first line across the face. And I just want to really draw out the overall shape that the eye sockets are making. So this isn't just where to place the eyes, this is also where I want to put in the eyebrows and things like that. So for the left one, I am just using where her nose ends to try to see if it's in line with where the eye sockets start. And then I'm just starting the lips off by drawing the mouth line first. It's a good idea to start with the corners because it's easy to place them, like if the corner of her mouth is wider than her nose, things like that. And then we can also gauge how full her lips are by trying to see if we've left out enough space for the length of her chin. And the same thing goes for the top lip. When I'm starting to place the eyes, I actually think it's a good idea to draw in the eyeballs first, so we can see if the proportions in that area corresponds to the rest of the face, but also so we can contain the eye shape in just that one area, because usually I will make the eyes too big and I don't want to do that this time. Once you've laid out all of those initial guidelines for the face, now it's time to make the face shape look more like the reference photo by trying to soften up the contours of her face and trying to get it to look like what's in the reference photo. And we're also then filling in the details for her ear and for her nose. For her nose, I can see where the bridge is sort of starting slightly above the eye, and it's a very minor detail, but one thing that tells a lot about the nose is where the bridge starts, and also if the tip is straight, sometimes it could be rounder. And then some of the other details I'm looking at is the nostrils, and for her it's sort of more open and turned up, so we want our drawing to reflect that. And then I'm also just adjusting her mouth to be a little bit wider than I had it before we can finally start with the eyes. So for her right one, you can kind of see that the folds of her eyelids is sort of moved away from the eyeball, so that's where we are starting. You can also see on the left one, when I am just slowly drawing in the curve of her eyelid, it's easier for me because I already had the eyeball drawn in before that. I just need to imagine what the skin would look like when it's draped over that round shape. And another thing that I sometimes mess up is how big to draw the irises. What I've found is that it's easier to look up how much the whites of the eyes are visible, and then that would tell me where to place the irises and how big to draw them. When it came to the eyebrows, I think I sort of just did them all in one direction and not in the direction that they grow. I was mostly in this time more focused on what the shape would look like. And then I'm also just slowly adding in the shadow area for her nose and some for her lips. And then I am slowly adding in more shape to her neck. Drawing in the overall shape of the hair, I think, is one of the more fun parts of this sketch. I just think that her bangs are so full of movement that you can really have fun in trying to make up the shapes. And then also just the hair on her head, I think, is a lot easier because we had that fear laid down at the very beginning. What we need to worry about now is where exactly to add tension to the hair, and also the areas where we can make the hair look looser, like right near her neck. So now as we are going into starting the shading, I'm just holding my pencil way on its side right now, and I'm also adding in more force than before. I think holding the pencil this way just is easier when you're shading. When you're doing this, it's also a good idea to make note of where the shadows are the darkest and where they fade out. I'm also just adding a lot of shadows to her chin. And on the ones that are for her hair, since her hair is dark by itself, I'm just slowly applying more pressure to that part so it's darker than the rest of her. And also while I'm doing this, I'm also making sure that I'm following the pattern of her hair from her scalp and going over to her ponytail because it is darker when they're more compact like that. Also just trying to leave out the middle areas to be the lightest parts of the shading, just to create this sort of illusion of highlights for her hair. I'm doing the same thing for her bangs. I'm not really connecting those strands on purpose because I want to leave those middle areas as highlights. And I'm also just making sure that my pencil is following the flow of the hair. And you see that I'm adding the most pressure on where the hair is most compact, like right where she's tied her ponytail. And then for the rest of the strands, I am more looser with my shading. As I'm shading in her face, I am just making sure that I'm not adding too much pressure to the pencil because the shadows on her face are a lot more delicate than the ones on her hair. And I slowly just filled in those areas, like right under her nose and under her lips. It really took me a while to get the hang of how to shade her lips, so I sort of just filled all of them out, making sure I'm being really careful this time. And now I'm just slowly filling in some very light shadows to her face, like for areas around her eyes. I'm just filling all of those out. This isn't very heavy shadows. These are just really the tiniest of strokes just to knock out the white of the paper. And you can still see that as I'm doing this, I'm leaving out the areas that are most in highlights, like near her nose and for some of her cheeks. And I'm just slowly darkening up the eyes too. There really is a lot of details to her eyes that I think I missed the first time. I think what I should have done is resharpened my pencil so I can really fill in those details more. But yeah, things like the double eyelid I sort of almost missed. And just making the eyes look darker than the rest of her. And then when I really wanted to go over the lightest of shadows, I am just using my finger to blend out those pencil marks that I laid down before. I wouldn't recommend doing this because I've heard that this could damage your paper and make your artwork not last that long. But since I am just doing this as a sketch, more like a study, that's what I'm doing, but I wouldn't recommend anyone else do it unless they're just doing this as a study too. When I'm doing this, I'm still making sure that I am keeping my finger out of the areas that are supposed to be in highlights, like her cheeks, her nose, and some parts of her chin. So now I am using my eraser to erase some of those dark lines that I had on her upper lip. I'm also doing the same thing for her nose. I think I sort of made the shadows there too dark, so I just deleted those, but then I feathered over the lines that are around it, so I'm just adding back the slightest amount of shadows to that area. Then I am just darkening up more of the shadows that are on her neck, and I am just doing that really to the rest of the sketch. And you can see now that I am just starting to draw in the hair. Before, I don't really consider what I did before as drawing the hair. It was more like laying down the values that I needed to draw over. So now is really when I'm drawing in her hair. When I'm doing the bangs, it's very similar to when I sketched. So I'm starting from one area and then leaving an area blank where I wanted there to be highlights before continuing on the rest of the strands. And it's sort of just a repeat process at this point. When I'm drawing hair, I always want to start in the darkest area and then draw in scratches, so my pencil marks naturally has this gradient. And I just think this part is really fun. I especially liked sketching with my Blackwing pencil. I think it shines in sketches like this, where it ranges from very light shading all the way to very dark lines. I just think it's a very versatile pencil and I really enjoy it for sketching. When I finally almost finished the sketch, what I'm doing right now is sort of just a finishing touch, but I am using my Copic opaque white to really fill in those highlights, and I'm mostly just focusing them on her eyes. I'm not really sure how realistic this part is, I just really liked how they look, and I'm making sure that I'm not filling in all of the whites of her eyes, just some of the edges and some of the highlights, and I'm just adding that to some of the other areas too. After that, I think I'm done. So that is it for this video. Thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you guys again soon.